Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael Aun Weor. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of hundreds available as free downloads, podcasts, or transcriptions. Our lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. We invite you to browse our library of lectures to find teachings that suit you. Each Saturday, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live and includes a free online classroom, allowing listeners to see images, read related scriptures, and ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate, visit gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is a service of Glorian Publishing, a non-profit organization. The lectures and radio broadcast have been made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. Most spiritual schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. To make a donation, visit gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
Hello. The microphone was not functioning. So I'll begin again. In every religion, in every tradition, we find that there's always a foundation or presentation of a universal cosmic force. And that force or energy has different names according to the different languages and different psychologies of those traditions. In the Gnostic tradition, we talk about Christ. And the word Christ comes from the Greek Christos, which has different meanings depending on the context that we use the word. But the esoteric root of that word Christos is fire. And it refers not to physical fire, but to an energy that gives rise to all living things. Christ is the source of life, the source of living. Everything that exists is the body of Christ. Every atom, every particle, every energy is that force or energy that we call Christ. In other traditions, that same energy has other names. And it has different symbols and myths that help us to understand that energy. Because as the very basis of living, it is very difficult to comprehend. Our mind is very limited in its capacity to understand the infinite, which is what the Christ is. It is infinite life. In the Sanskrit language, that force, at the level that it first emerges into existence, is called Amitabha, which means infinite light. The Buddha Amitabha. Limitless light, or infinite light. And that light is that same fire of Christos. It is not physical light or physical fire. It is the light or fire of existence itself. In Kabbalah, that infinite light or limitless light is called in Hebrew Ein Sof, or. Ein Sof, or, means limitless light. So we find in these three traditions the same energy with different names. This first graphic shows the Buddha Chinrezig, which is a Tibetan word for Christ, the same energy. Chinrezig in Sanskrit is called Avalokiteshvara. And Avalokiteshvara, or Chinrezig, is the full and complete compassion of Christ that manifests in existence. So in other words, when the Ein Sof Or first becomes, it is Chinrezig, Avalokiteshvara. Another way to look at this energy that's symbolized here in this four-armed image sitting on a lotus is that it is the compassion of all the gods. Chinrezig, or Avalokiteshvara, is the love in every Buddha or angel. All of them combined is Chinrezig, Avalokiteshvara, Christ. So if you use your imagination and try to visualize all of the Buddhas in the entire field of existence, all of the angels, all of the masters, all of the devas, all of the gods, and how much love they have, that love is Chinrezig, Avalokiteshvara. So this image shows Chinrezig sitting on a lotus, and that lotus sits on a mantra. That mantra on this graphic is written in Tibetan, and the mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum. Those Sanskrit letters or vowels are written here in Tibetan because that mantra is the special providence of the protector deity of Tibet, who is Chinrezig, Avalokiteshvara. So this is our topic for today. Om Mani Padme Hum. Understand what that is, what it means, what is Christ, how do they relate. This mantra, of course, is very famous. If you've ever heard of the Dalai Lama or any form of Buddhism, you've probably also heard of this mantra. That's how famous it is. If you've ever seen a Tibetan prayer flag, that's what's on the prayer flag, is this mantra. If you've ever seen a prayer wheel, which can be small handheld wheels or even giant ones that take several people to turn, those prayer wheels are filled inside with thousands and thousands of this mantra written on paper. The larger prayer wheels have millions of this prayer, this mantra written down. The reason it's on prayer wheels and prayer flags and written on stones is because when the mantra is put in motion, it puts in motion energy. And in the Tibetan tradition, this has become the signature of practice in that tradition, is the movement of this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. So if you have any familiarity with it, that tradition, you'll know this mantra. Its importance is underscored in this quote from Padmasambhava, who brought Tibetan Buddhism or Tantra to Tibet, who said, Avalokiteshvara gazes with overwhelming compassion towards all the 6 classes of sentient beings who are tormented by misery. The compassion that has the Dharma as its focus is the 6 syllables of Om Mani Padme Hum. The virtues of the 6 syllables are immeasurable and cannot be fully described even by the Buddhas of the 3 times. Why is that? It is because this mantra is the quintessence of the mind of the noble Avalokiteshvara, who continually looks upon the 6 classes of sentient beings with compassion. Thus, the recitation of this mantra liberates all beings from samsara. This quote explains the primary teaching that Padmasambhava gave to the Tibetans. We've explained in many lectures that Padmasambhava was a great Indian, or is a great Indian Buddhist master, who many centuries ago, was invited to bring Tantra to Tibet in order to help clarify the teachings. And the chief emphasis that he provided to the Tibetan nation was to point out to them this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. This is the main work that he performed. And what he did is he established for the Tibetan culture many centuries of protection under the influence of Chinrezig, Avalokiteshvara. In other words, Padmasambhava was the one who informed the Tibetan culture that as long as they were true to the Dharma and protected it and practiced it, they would in return receive the protection of Chinrezig, Avalokiteshvara. And the main core practice was the use of the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Nowadays, of course, the entire world is amazed with the Tibetan knowledge. Over the last 60 years, the knowledge that had been protected for many centuries in Tibet has been propagated around the world. And that's because for many centuries, it was protected and nourished in the Tibetan plateau under the auspices of Avalokiteshvara, Chinrezig. And when the time came, that knowledge was brought out to prepare the way for the next phase of the evolution of this humanity. As such, that mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, in use in the Tibetan plateau for many centuries, in that nested, protected environment, has also been brought out to the world, but also is undergoing a change, a deepening. As the Dharma is being revealed and opened up to the world, new levels are being opened up, new knowledge, new information. Chinrezig, as I told you, is primarily seen in this form that we see in this graphic. White-bodied with 4 arms, seated on a lotus. In Tibetan and Sanskrit, the lotus is Padme, or Padma, or Pema. Chinrezig is the emanation of Amitabha, which means the limitless light or infinite light. And Chinrezig, as I told you, is the compassion of all the Buddhas embodied as a Buddha. In his center hands, he holds a precious element. His hands are in the position of prayer, and between them is a stone. It's called Chintamani. That stone, that word in Sanskrit, Chintamani, can be translated in various ways because it's very deep and very symbolic. And we mentioned in a previous lecture that that is usually translated as the wish-fulfilling gem. It has a very deep significance, especially in Tantra. In his other hands, he holds other symbolic elements, a rosary and a flower. But his primary importance in the Tibetan tradition is that he represents compassion, or bodhicitta. And we've explained previously that bodhicitta is a Sanskrit word. It's usually translated as awakening mind. But the deeper meaning in Tantra is sexual energy. And that's also what the stone in his hand represents. He's holding it over his heart. That stone is the foundation stone, mentioned in the Bible, mentioned in the Zohar, hidden in the Greek mysteries. It is the stone that Arthur draws the sword from. It is the stone that Jacob anointed with oil. It is the foundation stone of the temple that the builders reject, but that Jesus taught very beautifully about. That stone is the Sephira Yesod in the Kabbalah, which relates directly to the sexual organs and sexual energy. Here we see Chinrezig holds that stone at his heart, meaning sexual energy needs to be pure, related with the heart, emotion, related with compassion, not lust. related with prayer. His hands hold that energy as a prayer. This is very significant. This image of Chinrezi is the outer meaning. It's the public level of instruction about Chinrezi. This is the type of image related with Om Mani Padme Hum that is taught publicly in every Tibetan tradition. Also in other Mahayana traditions in China and some other countries. Avalokiteshvara or Chinrezi is also known in the Chinese traditions as Kuan Yin. And in those traditions, Chinrezi can also appear as a woman. Because compassion or love is often characterized as the type of love that a mother has for a child. It's that deep, that protective, that profound. We need to understand these things because in order to understand this mantra, you need to understand its importance and purpose and how it relates to the deities. Om Mani Padme Hum. These are the letters of this mantra. It has 6 letters. And in this graphic, you see that each one has a different color. The colors are all symbolic and important. We see here 5 primary colors that are important in all Buddhism. Yellow, green, white, blue, red. The 6th, which in this particular image is a dark blue, is also usually black. Those 5 colors relate to 5 elements. They also relate to 5 afflictions, the 5 poisons. The 6 relate to the 6 worlds, the 6 bardos, the 6 paramitas, the 6 types of beings. They have very deep significance. And as the quote from Padmasambhava said, not even the Buddhas can explain all the meanings and importance of this mantra. Not even the Buddhas can explain it. That's how deep it is. So I'm not going to attempt to give you everything in one lecture today. It's impossible. There's too much hidden in this mantra. But just so you get the general sense, these are Tibetan letters, 6 syllables. Each one has importance and meaning. If you go, they start from left to right, just like English. The first one in white is Om. We all know the letter Om from Sanskrit, from Hinduism. Om. Now that sounds like one sound, but it's actually 3 sounds. And in the Tibetan letter, we can see those 3 components very clearly. I'll come back to that to explain more about the Om. The second letter, which is green, is Ma. The third, which is yellow, is Ni. The fourth is blue, Pad, which is actually 2 letters, but 1 syllable. The 5th is Me, which is written enclosing the Pad. And the final is Hum, which is black. This mantra begins with Om. And that letter has 3 components, which relate to the 3 forces, the 3 kaya, the Trinity. The bottom portion, the largest part, is the Tibetan letter A. That is, in Hebrew Kabbalah, Keter, the Father, the crown. Just above that is a dashed line, which represents the O. This relates to Chokmah in Kabbalah. And at the very top is the M as a circle, which incidentally, in Hebrew and in Sanskrit, the letter M is written as an enclosed shape, a circle or square. So we see the same is true here in Tibetan. So this letter Om, the syllable Om, has 3 parts. You may have heard that the vowel or mantra Om is the most important mantra. It's because this mantra encodes or symbolizes Christ. Christ has three forces that work in harmony to create. All life comes as a result of the power of creation, and creation is always a combination of three factors. This is why every religion has a Trinity as its foundation. Christianity has the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Hinduism has Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Kabbalah has Keter, Hokmah, Binah. In every religion, the Nordic religion, the Egyptian, even in Masonry, we find those three factors, three forces. In the Gnostic tradition, we call them the Logos. And this is because in the book of John, in the Bible, the Christian Bible, it says, "In the beginning was the Word." That word in Greek is Logos. And that term refers not to a written word or a physical word. Logos means the sound that emerges from a thought. In other words, God had the impulse of creation, the archetype, in other words. And when that expresses and starts to become something, that is Logos. So it's the same symbol as Amitabha, the infinite light, unfolding Chinrezi out of compassion for all beings. Because God, the Logos, Amitabha, sees the suffering of all beings and recognizes the need to do something. Chinrezig appears. That is the Logos. It's important to understand this because in many religions, in many schools, these three forces are talked about in a very dry, scholarly way, in a very intellectual way, like we're just organizing pieces of a puzzle on a table. These three forces are not inanimate objects. They are not mechanical forces in nature. They are a cognizance that has the creative power to produce an entire universe and all the beings in it. And the reason that happens is because of love, because of compassion. Not out of tyranny, not out of a cruel joke, not to punish us, but out of compassion for us. These three forces are how compassion or love comes to be. These three forces are in everything. Everything. But in us, they are obscured. We've lost touch with it. We don't see it because we're too hypnotized by our pride, by our lust, by our fear, our attachment, our ignorance, and all of the other discursive qualities that have disrupted our mind. Om represents the creative power of primordial nature. It is the manifestation of the absolute. It is the vibration of creation. Three forces that create. We say Om, but hidden in that are three sounds. Aum. When we look at that more closely on the tree of life, we see at the very top of the tree of life the absolute. Amitabha. The infinite light that first emanates as the upper trinity on the tree of life. That trinity is the three forces that begin to create all living things. In other words, manifestation begins. What does that imply? It implies a change from the absolute primordial emptiness to something. That happens because of karma. It happens because of causes that have been put in motion in the past and that must be answered. It happens because all of us have set up causes in the past that have to be solved. And it happens because the infinite light seeks to perfect compassion through us. And the only way that can happen is if we are here, alive. with the chance to act, using those energies of the three forces in ourselves. And those energies of the three forces come through us in many ways. We have three nervous systems: the central, sympathetic, and grand sympathetic. We have three brains: intellect, heart, and body. We need to use those three forces in every motion of ourselves, physically, emotionally, and mentally, but consciously, in order to take advantage of those forces and use them in manifestation wisely. So what we see then is Om here, the top of the tree of life. Om. If we superimpose this graphic over our physical body, the feet are related with Malkut at the bottom, the top of the head with Keter at the top. So that Om vibrates from the infinite above throughout our entire being. Those three sounds synthesized in that mantra create everything, including ourselves. So the use of that mantra is quite powerful. This is a breakdown of the specific meanings of these words. Om, as I told you, is the primordial sound. Mani, which is the second set of syllables, it's two syllables, ma and ni, means a stone, a jewel, anything round. But it also means a phallus. It also means a clitoris. It means a magnet. And it comes from the root Sanskrit term ma, which means to create. It's quite obvious when you look at the meanings of this word that they're all related. What in our body is the strongest magnetic force that we have? Sex. Nothing stronger in us than that power. The sexual power. It is a magnet. And that magnet can attract or repel. That magnet is most powerful in the sexual organs. And it is the power of Ma, the mother. That term, that syllable Ma, worldwide is used for mother. Ma, Ama, Uma, Oma, Mama, mother, mater in Latin. That Ma means to create. Who else has that power? The mother. How does the mother have the power to create? Through sex. There is no other way. And as we always state in every esoteric tradition, as above, so below. And as below, so above. If physically the only way to create life is through sex, it is also true above, spiritually. The only way to create spiritual life is through sex. But as Chinrezig shows it, holding the Mani stone as a prayer at his heart, this is the only way to create in harmony with the divine, through prayerful, pure sexuality. The second set of two syllables, Padme, as I told you, means lotus. But it also is a symbol for the vagina. This is a very obvious symbol that most people, especially who've studied art history, know very well. That throughout the centuries and in pretty much every culture, flowers have been used to represent feminine sexual potency. Even as late as the recent centuries with artists like George O'Keeffe. But in previous eras, throughout time and in every culture, flowers represent the unfolding of creation, which happens through the vagina. The child is created through that. The final syllable is Hum. This is the one that's black. And Hum synthesizes the entire mantra. Hum sounds like Om, right? It's almost the same, but it has an H. The H is the breath. You remember I mentioned the logos. The thought, the imagination of God comes into being through a word, and that word can only express through a breath. This is why the Aztec priests, when they were asked by the conquistador priests, "What is the name of your God?" And the Aztec priest said, "It is the power of the breath that creates through the word." So here in these 6 syllables, Om, Ma, Ni, Pad, Me, Hum, we see the creative power of God, the creative power of any Buddha, which is sexual, which is why every religion has emphasized the importance of pure sexuality and has told its strongest initiates, to advance to the highest levels of the tradition, you must retain that sexual energy and transform it. Not spend it like a beast, not be lustful, but to harness that energy and make it pure. This is why initiates in traditions were converted into monks and nuns to enter a period of preparation in which they retained that energy, were not hypnotized by any form of lust or distraction sexually, and could learn to work with that energy directly until the time came when they were prepared to enter into a relationship to fully harness that energy. And this is hidden throughout the Bible. It's hidden throughout Tantra, but was never made public. And that's because most of us have never been interested, only interested in satisfying our desires. What we see in these 6 syllables is the synthesis of the entire teaching. Any teaching, anywhere in the world, has this synthesis in its heart. It may not be visible now because of degeneration, because of politics, because of the interest that people have to corrupt their traditions and take power. But it's always there, hidden. What we find then is a very deep meaning. Now, publicly, these meanings are not given. I've already introduced you into a secret level that was never given publicly. But there's more, which we're going to talk about next. But just so you're aware of it, what most people say is that Om Mani Padme Hum means the jewel in the lotus. And that's because Mani can mean jewel, and Padme can mean lotus. But nobody knows what that means. Why would it be important to have a mantra that says the jewel in the lotus? Why is that meaningful? Nobody knows. Because they haven't been initiated into the levels where that knowledge is given. I'm going to give you some of that today. The important thing to recognize here is that these syllables have meanings far deeper than the surface, than the superficial level. But even if you look at this superficial level, you can see something very deep. The Mani represents the masculine power, sexually, represents a phallus. The Padme represents a vagina. The power to create life is in the union of those two, the crossing of male and female. And when that happens between the Om and the Hum, you have something divine. That's the importance of this mantra. But this is not taught publicly, not until recently. The deeper level of this mantra is taught in secret. And it's related to the secret level of the teachings of Chinrezig, which are called Chinrezig Gyalwa Gyatso. Here we see an image of this level of Chinrezig. He is in his white-bodied form, but in sexual union with his consort, his spouse, who's called Vajrayogini. Chinrezig Gyalwa Gyatso is a Tibetan word, or Tibetan name, that is difficult to translate. but it means something more or less like the compassionate victory of liberation, the ocean of liberation, something like that. The Savior ocean. It's hard to translate that into English. Those words have very deep significance. But what you can see in this image is clearly that Chinrezig holds sexual knowledge. Monks and nuns of the Tibetan tradition are not initiated into this. So if you go and ask them, they might get mad. It happened to a friend of mine. That's why I'm telling you. We have to be respectful of the level at which every student is working. Don't assume that other people know what you know. We have to respect their level and the work that they're doing. Chinrezig Gyalwa Gyatso is the highest yoga tantra in Tibetan Buddhism. It is one of the most secret techniques, most secret teachings that's given in Tibetan Buddhism. It's secret. This means that the vast majority of people in the Tibetan tradition do not know about it. This means that if you know about it, you should be respectful to others when discussing it or asking about it. Be aware they may not know. Nonetheless, in this image we can see Chinrezig in the male form united with Chinrezig in the female form. White and red. In tantric iconography, white and red represent Ida and Pingala. Adam and Eve, male and female, the two aspects of our vital energy in ourselves. In other words, this image does not represent a deity alone. It does represent that. But its most important meaning is inside of us, related to our own energies on a very high level. Energies that we can learn to harness and utilize. This image represents the creative and destructive power of sexuality. What we see is Chinrezig in his usual form with the lotus and the rosary in his hands, which represent method and wisdom, united with a red dakini, or divine woman. She is Vajra Yogini. That name means diamond yogi. Very pure. If you ever heard the word Vajra Sattva, it's related to that. Or Vajradhara. In tantric symbolism, Vajradhara is Adi Buddha. It is the aim. It is the highest aspect of anything. It is the nothingness. So Vajra Yogini is the essence of that, the very power of knowledge of emptiness. She holds in her hands two important elements. In this image, she's holding a drum and a skull filled with blood. In other images of her, you'll see that she holds a blade, a knife. And these images represent, on one hand, the drum is the beating of the heart back and forth, which is male, female, resounding in all creation. Male, female, right? Duality. And in the other is the human skull with blood. This is the vital energy, sexual energy. Vajra Yogini is a very important symbol in Tantra. Now, this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, can also be arranged in another way, because the original Sanskrit doesn't have spaces. It's just lines of mantras, just like Hebrew. In other classes, we've always talked about Bereshit, the first word of the book of Genesis, which has an infinite number of interpretations. The same is true of this mantra. Here's one. Oma, Nipa, Dam, Hum. The same 6 syllables. Oma, Nipa, Dam, Hum. Oma is the name of the goddess. Amma, mother. Nipa is Sanskrit and means water flowing down. That water is the Shamayim, written in Genesis. The waters in the beginning that God divides, one from the other. That water is sexual water, which descends into us, into our energetic system, into our nervous systems, from above, from God, into us, every day. In tantric medicine, it's said that that energy begins at the top of the spine and flows down the spine and reaches the sexual organs. And when that energy reaches that level, it's when we start to have the urge for sexual action. This happens every day in cycles. That is Nipa, water flowing down, the creative waters that flow down through our nervous system. The next is Dham, which means to be rooted, established. In other words, we want that energy to flow into us and be rooted and established in us, not lost, not wasted, not misused. And finally, the final syllable, Hum, is the indivisibility of ourselves with God. So you see, Om Mani Padme Hum, two distinct meanings, same 6 syllables, but they're related to each other, the two meanings. In this case, this is more personal. Oma, Nipa, Dham, Hum is a prayer to our own Divine Mother to bring that creative energy into us and make it firm, establish it, make it strong. Not corrupted, not mixed with lust, not mixed with fear and pride and envy, not wasted in animal lust or bestiality or addiction, attachment to sex, but instead harnessed, given back to her, made pure. This is only one meaning of that mantra that can be disarranged. What we need to understand is that when Padmasambhava gave this mantra and gave these teachings, he knew and recognized that all of us are very lustful and will interpret these teachings according to our lust. And this is what we find nowadays. If any of us decide to take this information and go out and research it, 99% of what we find will be pure lust. Just lust. People that take these teachings and use it in order to fulfill their desires, to have lots of sex with lots of people and call it spiritual. They're lying to themselves and others. The proof of it is here. Padmasambhava, the bringer of Tantra to Tibet, stated, lustful people do not enter the path to liberation. Period. Most people that are studying spirituality nowadays, to some degree, have heard about sexuality in relation with spirituality. Have heard something about Tantra or yoga or alchemy, transmutation. But very rare now do we find anyone who's heard about it in the right way. That it should be something ethical, not lustful. Pure, conscious, not animal, not indulgent. But something that's united with prayer and compassion. We can't comprehend that at our level because our minds are so corrupted by self-interest. Self-interest is a contrary current to Christ. The Christic energy is only concerned with compassion for others, not oneself. It's only concerned with helping others to end suffering. Lust only wants satisfaction of desire. And thus, those of us who are lustful are in an opposing current to the Christic current. The continual addiction to lust is a continual production of suffering. And thus, if you're serious about conquering suffering, about helping others, you have to deal with lust. It is the single most important aspect to make real progress. It cannot be avoided. It's proven in this mantra. The 6 syllables, when disarranged and analyzed in their meanings, as I explained in the beginning, have an infinite level of meanings. So many meanings and so much importance that not even the Buddhas can explain it all. But if we look quickly at a little simple chart of the 6 syllables, we can start to understand something about their depth. The first syllable is Om. It relates to the element of wind or air. When used consciously, with energy, it helps to cultivate new virtues because it brings the qualities of Christ into us. The quality of Chinrezig, that energy, that force. It directly opposes pride. Chinrezig is not proud. Christ is not proud. Christ is humble. Moreover, Christ is generous. The energy and force of Christ is the force of sacrificial love. A love for others that's so strong, it's stronger than a mother for a baby. A mother can give her life for her child, and Christ does the same for us. Whether that Christ is manifested in a bodhisattva, a master, or is working from the internal worlds for us. Christ gives and gives and gives and gives and doesn't ask for anything in return. The syllable Om represents all of that, empowers all of that, energizes all of that. If you were simply to take that mantra and constantly keep that vibration with you throughout your day, throughout your night, not mechanically, not just repeating it the same way that you think about all your worries, but to actually be tasting it on your tongue, to be experiencing it in your mind, to be feeling it in your heart, to be projecting it throughout your body. That energy can change you because you're bringing your consciousness here and now, present. And you're invoking inside of yourself an intelligence that is far superior to your animal mind. That's just one syllable. If you work with it, you'll find that it naturally helps you to realize that pride is an affliction. It naturally inspires you with humility and with generosity. Naturally. It's not forced. You don't have to think, okay, I'm doing the mantra Om, now I have to be humble, and I have to give to others. It isn't like that. The mantra has this effect. If you use it consciously, these qualities will merge on their own. It just happens. It won't happen if you're doing it mechanically, just repeating it, but distracted and thinking about other things. Then this mantra has no power. The second syllable is Ma, which in the graphic was green. It relates to the element of water. It contradicts and overpowers jealousy and envy. And it cultivates and helps us to understand ethics. Ma is the name of the Divine Mother. It's important. If we really remembered our Divine Mother from moment to moment, we would never be afraid. Moreover, we would never want something that we don't have because we would feel her presence in us. We suffer now because we don't feel the presence of the divine. We don't even believe in it all the time. And we're supposed to be the spiritual people. If you use this mantra, this syllable Ma, constantly keeping it in your presence, constantly aware of its sound. In your heart, in your mind, in your body. Ma, 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 ma. And in everything you do, going to work, eating, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the house, taking care of the kids, going to bed, going to the bathroom, showering. Everything you do, if that ma is there with you and you're present and you're watching yourself and you're prayerful, you won't have a chance for your envy to interfere. Because that ma brings the power and energy of your divine feminine. She loves you. When you feel that love, you need nothing else. In fact, you want to get rid of what you have. Because you find that everything else is a distraction, is a burden. Takes too much time and energy, and you just want to be free to be with her, to feel her in yourself. That is how true ethics emerge. If you're really feeling and sensing the presence of your Divine Mother, you cannot do anything unethical. It's impossible. When you really feel the presence of the Divine Mother with you, how can you lie? How can you cheat? How can you feel lust or indulge in pride? Or want something that isn't yours? You can't. Because her presence is there in your heart. And you cannot do it. The reason we're capable of committing those mistakes is we forget her. Intentionally and unintentionally. The vowel, the syllable ma, has a lot of power. Ni is the third syllable. Yellow, related with earth. Ni is related with lust or craving, desire, even passion. It is an afflictive force. It's related with earth because earth is our body. In every scripture, in every religion, the earth represents the body. The earth, our body, is afflicted with lust because we've created lust in our minds. And the body is subject to that desire. The mantra Ni helps us to cultivate and establish patience. Why? Because it takes a lot of patience to deal with lust. A lot. Lust is very powerful. It does not give up easily. It is not easy to overcome. It is potent. It is subtle. It uses every trick it can in our psychology and in our environment in order to feed itself. To conquer it cannot be done in a day, a week, a month. It takes a lifetime, maybe more. The result of conquering lust is to become a Buddha, an angel. That does not come quickly. Thus, we need patience. The fourth syllable is pad. Is blue, is related with the ether or sky. When you think about the ether as an element or a tattva, the akash, the reason it's presented in Tibetan Tantra as sky instead of something else. Have you looked at the night sky recently? I mean, looked at it. Really. If you did, you will remember that you cannot conceive of it. It's too huge. When you look at the sky and you contemplate how many suns, how many galaxies, solar systems, planets, it's overwhelming. We are nothing in that scale, in that scope. We are specks of dust. That is what dispels ignorance. Our fundamental ignorance is that we think we are something. We think only about ourselves all the time. This is the root of suffering. It is the main poison. The Buddha taught about 3 poisons. Ignorance is the very center of the wheel of samsara. It is the axis upon which it spins. And that ignorance is a lack of knowledge of oneself. It is a complete misapprehension of our true nature. It is a grasping at an identity that does not exist. That constant me and myself, I, what I need, what I want, how I was wronged, what I deserve, what I need, what I will get. That is the cause of suffering. It is the cause of all of the suffering on this planet and every planet. We have a very foolish perception of life. That is why we suffer. That is why there's pain. That is why there is anxiety and fear, and violence and war, and rape and poverty, and every injustice that exists, because we're not aware of anyone else. We're not even aware of ourselves. To have real knowledge is to understand the relationship between ourselves and others. It is to understand that everyone deserves better than what we give them. It is to learn to treat each other as Christ taught, to love each other. To recognize that in every person is a divinity that deserves a chance for liberation. If we continue with our lust, we obscure that opportunity for ourselves and others. If we continue with our pride, putting ourselves above others, we obscure the chance for our own liberation and others. With our greed, with our envy, with our jealousy, with our fear, we create all the wars. We create all the starvation, the hunger, the hardship. Not other people. We do it. If you go into any community in the world now, we always hear, our suffering is the result of such and such person, that politician, that company, that corporation, that country, those guys. That's all lies. Every particle in the universe is propelled by cause and effect. If we're experiencing an effect, we produced the cause. The Buddhas and angels are in heaven, in nirvana, because they produced the causes to be there. We are suffering in hell because we produced the causes to be there. True knowledge comes from diligence. Conscious diligence. To be awake. To be cognizant. To pay attention. To abandon the false sense of self. And to look deeper into each moment at how we are impacting others, how we are impacting the world. Our mind is not a closed shell that no one else can see into. We all affect each other. We sense each other, we feel each other, we affect each other. We are not isolated. We are inside of each other. If you're around an angry person, you feel it, you sense it, it affects you, it infects you. Samael Aun Weor told us the most dangerous, damaging element is negative emotion because it's so infectious. It's more dangerous than any disease. Everybody's worried about AIDS and cancer. Those are not that important. What's important is anger, pride, lust. Those are far more damaging than AIDS, and cancer, and heart disease. Because anger, pride, lust, and envy poison the soul, the mind, and the heart. AIDS kills your body. You can get another body. But pride and lust that infects you from others and that you infect to others can affect you for lifetimes, and it can affect others for lifetimes. And there's a heavy karma with that, a lot of consequences. It's very serious. Thus, to dispel ignorance about our true nature, about the nature of suffering, about the nature of the planet, we need diligence. We need to work hard, consciously, paying attention, learning about life, how we interact with others. This mantra, pad, brings that power to work with these aspects of psychology. The fifth syllable is me, which is painted in red and is related with fire. Me is related to attachment. Usually people hear about attachment and they think about their attachment to their iPod, or their attachment to their car or their house, or maybe their children or their husband or wife. And these are all forms of attachment that can produce a lot of suffering. But they are not the most important forms of attachment. The most dangerous and damaging form of attachment is to one's own self. The false sense of self. The form of attachment that produces the most suffering is our attachment to our image. What others think of us, how they talk about us, how they see us, how we're dressed, how we walk, how we talk, our reputation. This is the most important form of attachment we need to work on. Our self-image. In other words, self-esteem. Now, it should be understood that we're talking about egoic self-esteem. Pride. We need real self-esteem, which is the dignity of the consciousness. We need to love that self, our true nature, not the ego. By attachment, we mean any mental formation that connects us to something that does not fundamentally exist. And if you study Gnostic philosophy, you'll discover that nothing fundamentally exists. Nothing. We have a lot of attachment to our body, to our hairstyle, to how much weight we've gained or lost, how much money we have in the bank, the clothes we wear, the city we live in, our education, our language, the books we've read, our musical tastes. Everything about our personality we have attachment. Everything about our family, our country. Of course, our material possessions as well. But those aren't the most significant attachments that we have. The most significant attachments we have are psychological. The physical parts don't matter that much. Whether you're rich or poor, truly, it is irrelevant. What is relevant is our state of consciousness and its relationship with what it perceives. Contemplate that. When our consciousness misperceives, we build attachment. When we mistakenly perceive ourselves or external things, we build attachment. Every single ego is attachment. Every ego of pride, every ego of lust, of envy, of fear, of jealousy, of avarice, of laziness, they're all attachments. Not attachments to external things, but attachments to sensations. We're attached to pride because of how it makes us feel. We're attached to lust, not because of how it feels physically, but how it feels psychologically. Contemplate that. The fulfillment of lust is not really a physical act, it's psychological. Lust, which we talked about in relation with the syllable ni, can only be really eliminated by analyzing attachment. Because really what we're usually lusting is the sensation of being lusted for. We want to be wanted. We do have lust for others, to explode that energy, to feel the sensations of sex, to indulge in that force, to feel all that, what we call pleasure. But it isn't the physical component that we are attached to. It's the psychological one that feels strengthened. When someone lusts for us, it boosts our pride, and we become attached to that. So men want to look sexy, and women want to look sexy, and they want to be wanted. Because of lust, yes, but mostly because of attachment to a false sense of self. To that pride, yes, they want me. It's a lie. It creates suffering. It has nothing to do with love. Nothing. And that is how the ego works in every case. With lust, with anger, with pride, with laziness. Attachment is involved with all of them. Ignorance is involved with all of them. The final sixth syllable is hum, which synthesizes everything. It's black. It's related with anger. Typically, we think of anger as someone red-faced and yelling. That is one form. But anger in this context is much deeper. Anger is also resentment. Anger is also hatred. Anger is also aversion, avoidance. There are many now who've heard this teaching. Samael Aun Weor put out his first book in 1950. It's been 61 years. Millions of people have heard about this knowledge. Very few fulfill it. They all have different reasons and excuses. But in every single case, no matter what they state, the reason they don't fulfill it is because of aversion. Anger. They avoid the truth. They are angry at God, angry at religion. But the root of it, and what nobody wants to recognize, is that they are angry with themselves. Every soul, every consciousness who encounters this teaching, if they are sincere with themselves, they know it's true. It cannot be denied. It is truth. And the ones who avoid it deny the truth. And often they become angry. They attack the teaching. They attack the teacher. This is a very serious issue all over the world, not just in the Gnostic tradition, but every tradition. It happens always. The antidote to that is real wisdom. That doesn't come from books. In Sanskrit is prajna. Prajna is the wisdom energy of Chenrezig, which in Sanskrit is called Manjushri. This image is prajna. You see, Manjushri here has a book and a sword. The book is prajna, and the sword is discriminative awareness or perception that cuts through appearances and sees the truth. We need that. You see all these rays of light, or all these vowels. In order to see the truth, we need to awaken. So we need all of these mantras, all of these vowels, all of these qualities to be working in harmony with each other. That's why this particular mantra is the single most powerful mantra we have. This is it. Padmasambhava wrote and taught pages and pages and pages and pages about this mantra. So did many other pandits and scholars in the Tibetan tradition, in the Tantric tradition, in the Mahayana traditions, about this mantra, about its power. And that's why he said, not even all the Buddhas can explain the power and knowledge in this mantra. Our problems are so deep, so profound, we need these syllables united, working in us constantly. If you've ever seen anything about Tibet, you've seen people chanting, maybe with a prayer wheel, maybe with a rosary, and they're always chanting this mantra because of its power, because of its emphasis in the tradition. Samael Aun Weor taught this mantra, but he taught it in a very profound way. He provided it in this form, Om Mani Padme Hum. It is perfectly valid, very powerful. However, it is the introductory level. It is the basic level. If you use that mantra seriously, daily, from moment to moment, constantly keeping that mantra present with you as you are present here and now, it will transform you. Some people say it's just sounds. It's just a bunch of vowels, syllables strung together. It doesn't mean anything. We're talking and thinking all day long the same vowels and syllables, and those don't liberate us. How could these 6 syllables liberate us? What's the difference? This skeptical line of thinking is skeptical, but it provides a useful entryway into the explanation of why it works. If you use the mantra the way you use your thinking now, it won't do anything. If you just chant it mechanically, repeating it to yourself, some people get the instruction, you need to do this mantra 1,000 times, or you need to do this mantra 10,000 times, or you need to do it 1,000,000 times, and you'll even see people with little counters walking around clicking it. Click, 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 as they do the mantra very rapidly. They're making a mistake. You can say the mantra once and get more power from it than you can if you say it 10 million times. If you say it once properly. Properly means present, awake, here and now, not distracted, but using all of the force of your attention to empower it. That's what makes the mantra work, your consciousness. It isn't the vowels, it isn't the syllables, it's you. Not you here physically, terrestrially, not the sound of your physical body's voice. It is the energy that comes from above, through your 3 nervous systems, through your 3 brains, from Chinrezig in you, from Vajrayogini in you. If you're conscious, present, cognizant, paying attention, relaxed, visualizing that energy in motion, visualizing the mantra, you will awaken. You will awaken in direct proportion to your diligence. So here are these 6 vowels, 6 syllables. Om Mani Padme Hum. This is a perfectly valid way of using this mantra. But as I mentioned, it is the beginning level. It is not the secret level. For most people, this mantra as it stands can take them very far on the path. Its chief power is to awaken intuition, the powers of the heart. Remember, Chinrezig holds the Chintamani at his heart. In other words, he takes all your sexual power and focuses it in your heart. The power of the heart is intuition. The ability to know without reasoning. Just to know it. It is a type of knowledge that is far beyond the intellect. It is divine. With intuition, we can navigate the most difficult and complex problems with utter simplicity because we don't have to think about it. We don't reason. We don't compare options. We don't analyze. We just know. All of us are facing complicated problems. Life is hard. Life is suffering right now for all of us because of our ignorance, because we're asleep. But by awakening intuition, we start to see where to place our feet. Not through reasoning, not because we read it in a book or somebody told us, but because we know it in our heart. What is right? That is the chief power of this mantra. It is most effective if we're transmuting the sexual energy. If we're fornicating, if we're continuing with the orgasm, this mantra can't do anything. It can't do anything because there's no energy. The energy that Christ needs, that Shinrezig needs to liberate us is bodhicitta, which is the sexual energy. That is the energy that creates the soul, that creates the awakening mind, the mind of Christ. Is that sexual energy purified and made creative divinely? If you're wasting it through animal sex, through masturbation, through lust, through pornography, you're wasting your time. None of this will help you. In order to walk in these paths, in order to use these mantras, to use these practices, to awaken intuition, to see the truth, you need energy. There's no other way. That's why initiates who've received this type of teaching, beginners, get this mantra in a slightly different form. That third syllable, instead of being ni, becomes si. Om Ma Si Padme Hum. The S is now incorporated into the mantra. This has been cause for some controversy because of ignorance. Some people don't understand the change in the mantra and criticize Samael Aun Weor for teaching it in this way. And that's because those people don't understand. They don't have instruction. So if you're a student of this tradition and you hear criticism, you should feel compassion for those people. Don't get angry. They don't know. Samael Aun Weor explained that when he was visiting tantric adepts in the internal planes, he saw that in the physical world they were chanting the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum with the N. But in the internal worlds, in the astral plane, the fifth dimension, they were saying Om Ma Si Padme Hum. The N was exchanged for an S internally, secretly. So those who are in the physical world, who are asleep, don't know about that level of instruction. Thus, we should have compassion for them and educate them so that they will understand. So now I'm going to explain to you why the N becomes an S. If you look at this mantra, usually we disarrange the vowels, the 6 syllables, as 4 words. Om, Mani, Padme, Hum. But the reality is, in Sanskrit and in Tibetan, there are no spaces. And that means that when you're looking at the letters, there are different words that appear. This is part of the beauty of those languages. And so I already showed you the example of how Om, Ma, can be Amma, the mother. Similarly, if we look deeper into these letters, we find additional meanings that are hidden to the eyes of the flesh. Firstly, we need to understand something. Every vowel has a vibratory significance and importance in our physiology, not only in the physical aspect, but internal aspect. These mantras or vibrations are specific tones in nature that stimulate matter and energy. We're talking all the time and thinking all the time, but we're getting worse all the time. if we start to awaken and use our sexual energy wisely, all of that sound can change us in a good way. This is why in every tradition, the beginners chant. They sing. They sing sacred songs. They sing prayers. They sing mantras. They sing scriptures. This is true in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, every tradition. Why? Not because it sounds nice, which it does, but because of the energy. When you sing consciously, you put these vowels into motion in your physical body, in your vital body, in your astral body, in your mental body, in your causal body. This is how you awaken, through vowels. We talk about 7 fundamental vowels. E, A, O, A, U, M, S. Om, Mani, Padme, Hum has all the vowels but one. It does not have the S. The S is the mantra that stimulates the power of sex. That's why we say sex. The S is a serpent. Kundalini. What is the sound that fire makes? What is the sound that a serpent makes? That's the power we need to awaken. It is the power related with the sexual organ. Thus, when you change Om Mani Padme Hum to Om Masi Padme Hum, you're directly addressing the sexual energy. If someone is not initiated into this knowledge and they take that S and begin to use it, they can hurt themselves. That's why in the physical world, the S is not incorporated in the mantra. That's why for centuries it was not taught publicly to incorporate the S in the mantra. Only to those who had awakened and were working in the internal worlds, awakened, worked with the S. Now there's no more time. We don't have time for everybody to awaken physically in order to be introduced to that knowledge. We need to awaken fast. The karma is too heavy for us to wait. So now this teaching is given openly. Furthermore, we can learn more about this S when we look at other mantras in the tradition. In Sanskrit, in Hinduism, one of the most famous quotes from Scripture is Tat Tvam Asi, which means you are that. Tat Tvam Asi. But as I explained to you, Sanskrit and Tibetan don't have spaces in the letters. So this Tat Tvam Asi, which means you are that, has other meanings. The Tat is the Ein Sof. Tat is the absolute. Shunyata, the emptiness. It is the Adi Buddha. It is Amitabha. Tvam is the monad, our true self. Chesed in Kabbalah. Asi means you are. So when we put them together, Tat Tvam Asi. You, soul, are also that, the absolute. This is a very profound statement in Vedanta, the ancient philosophy of Hinduism. But when we look closely at these Sanskrit letters, we also see that it can be read Tattva Masi. A tattva is a vibration of energy. When I was explaining to you the first 5 syllables of Om Masi Padme Hum or Om Mani Padme Hum, we were talking about the 5 elements: air, earth, water, fire, and ether. Those are tattvas. They are vibrations of energy. So this phrase, you are that, can also be read tattva masi. And it means the vibration of matter, or the vibration of energy, of masi. Masi is Sanskrit. It means the black one. So if we break down that Masi and look at Om Masi Padme Hum, we see that Oma is the Divine Mother. We see Masi is to become black, or dark water, or ink. And it relates to a river. And of course, Padme and Hum we know. What does this mean? What does it mean to become black, or to be of a river? Buddhism comes from Hinduism. In Hinduism, all of the goddesses are related with water. Every goddess has a river. In India, you find the great river Sarasvati, the great river Kali, the Kali Gandaki. These are the names of goddesses and the names of rivers. Why? Because those goddesses are the waters that come from above, below. The power of sexuality is that sexual water that flows into us. And what does it mean to become black? I explained this teaching once to a student, and she became terrified. She thought, it means we're going to become black magicians. She left the teaching because of that word. That was her excuse. She didn't understand. She didn't understand that Oma is the name of the Divine Mother. And Masi is her most profound aspect, Prakriti. Or in other words, Vajrayogini. Vajrayogini in Hinduism is also called Kali. Kali means the black one. So when you say Om Masi Padme Hum, you're calling the Divine Mother in her most profound aspect, Vajrayogini. Sometimes she's called Sarva Buddha Dakini, which means the Dakini who is the essence of all the Buddhas. And what is the essence of all the Buddhas? What is a Buddha? One who is awake. And what is the chief characteristic of a Buddha? Love. What is the chief characteristic of a mother? Love. The power of sacrifice. So what is the chief characteristic of the Divine Mother? Universal power of sacrifice and love. Vajrayogini, as you see, appears in a very wrathful form. And to Westerners, it seems scary. And we think, oh, this is devil worship. It isn't. This is the mother and her power as a defender, as a protector. And let me tell you, there is no more powerful figure than a mother protecting her children. If you go out into the woods, you don't have to worry about the male bear. You have to worry about the female bear who's protecting her cubs. Vajrayogini has a very terrifying aspect. And in this particular image, you see that she has across her shoulder a staff. You've probably seen that staff before if you've ever looked at an image of Padmasambhava. It's the same staff. That staff represents the spinal column. And that is where she works, in the spinal column. She is Kundalini itself. That's the fire that's around her. The power of her creative force, harnessed, utilized in the spine. In other words, through applying this science in ourselves, her energy descends into us. We all have that energy in us, but latent. It's asleep. It isn't used. We're not using it. When we learn to awaken that power, it is Kundalini, and it rises up the spine. So just as that energy descends down through our nervous systems and becomes established in the sexual organs, when we learn how to harness that power, it awakens and ascends back up the spinal column. That is what awakens us. That's what liberates us. She does it. Not because we dress well, not because we said a mantra 1,000,000 times, not because we paid tithes or we serve a guru, but because we fulfill the requirements, which are sanctity is number one. We are eliminating the ego. Chastity is number two. We're saving the sexual energy so she can use it. Charity is number 3. We're sacrificing for others. These 3 factors must be in action in us every day. Birth, death, and sacrifice. Daily. That's how her power awakens, through 3 forces. You see that? That is Christ, the Logos. 3 forces that create through us. Through our 3 brains, through our 3 nervous systems, through birth, death, and sacrifice in our actions. That's why we see on this figure, she's red. That is the red fire of all of our energies being used by her power to cleanse us. In her hand, she has a knife. This particular type of knife is not a common knife. It's not a kitchen knife. It isn't a hunting dagger. It is a knife, a tool that's used for cutting up dead bodies. You've probably heard in Tibet about sky burials. There's no wood, and the ground's too hard to bury people. So in certain regions of Tibet, when you die, your body is cut to pieces so the birds can eat it. That's the knife they use. It's a knife for flaying bodies. In her other hand, she has a skull cap, the top of a human skull, from which she's drinking. Sounds scary, but it's actually quite beautiful. That is your skull. She is nourished by what is in your mind. So what is in your mind? Anger? Pride? Doubt? Or are you focused completely on trying to help other people, on serving others, on conquering your defects, and helping to deal with the problems that we face as a world? She will awaken according to the nourishment that you provide her. Around her neck, we see a big garland of skulls, 108 skulls. This is a very deep significance. It relates to the number of chances we get in a humanoid body to reach liberation. It also relates to our egos that must die. She stands upon a yellow pedestal. The color yellow is related with the body, the physical body, the earth. It's also related with the mind. So Vajrayogini is not a deity outside of us. She is the Divine Mother Kundalini. She will awaken in us according to how we work with her energy. So now I hope you can see why Om Masi Padme Hum is important. It is her mantra. She is the spouse of Chinrezi. She is the female aspect of Christ. She is the power, if we learn to work with her, who can eliminate our defects, which we see under her feet. She is trampling on our pride, our lust, our envy, our gluttony, our greed, and all of our suffering. And she can do that inasmuch as we follow her guidance. We need to become an expression of her compassion. You see, Vajrayogini is the dynamic, active aspect of Chinrezi. We saw the graphic of Chinrezi who first emerges from Amitabha. And Chinrezi represents the compassion of the Buddhas. But for him to act, to create, he needs his spouse. A man alone cannot create a child, and a woman alone cannot create a child. Likewise, for us to awaken as a child spiritually, to create the soul, to be born again, we need the union of these 2 forces in ourselves. Chinrezi, Vajrayogini. This is something that has to happen in us. So, Om Masi Padme Hum. Try it. Work with it. The mantra is best used constantly. Not just for 10 minutes. 24 hours a day. In everything you do. Chant it. Silently. Chant it aloud if you can. But the most power you can extract from a mantra is when you're chanting it with full attention, silently inside. The power of the mantra should be directed psychologically, not physically. If you're chanting it physically, you're going to be distracted by the sound of your voice, or worried if other people are listening, or you're going to be worried if I'm in tune or not. None of that matters. What matters is to be consciously pronouncing the tones and to be visualizing its power. It's stated in the scriptures that this mantra, in either form, Om Mani Padme Hum or Om Masi Padme Hum, has the power of every other mantra. If you need protection, if you need healing, if you need insight or understanding, this mantra will do it. But it can't do it if you're not paying attention. It can't do it if you're distracted. It can't do it if you're thinking about work while you're sitting there supposedly meditating. You have to be fully, consciously aware of what you're doing for the mantra to have the power that it has, for it to help you. And this is emphasized in this quote from Patrul Rinpoche, who wrote a couple hundred years ago, "As your life runs out like the setting sun sinking away, death closes in like the lengthening shadows of evening. Now what's left of your life will vanish as fast as the fading shadows. There's no time to waste. Recite the 6-syllable mantra." The 6-syllable mantra, although perfect as Dharma, is fruitless recited while chatting and looking around. And to cling to the number recited is to miss the point outright. Undistractedly watching the mind, recite the 6-syllable mantra. Memorize it. Use it. Don't just store this as intellectual knowledge. Make it practical. It really doesn't matter if you remember all the correspondences and meanings of the vowels. It doesn't matter if you can remember the color of each of the syllables and what element it relates to and the names that are hidden in it. None of that matters. What matters is that you open your heart and mind and that you're attentive and present and you sing it inside. Personally, I think singing it is more potent. You can chant it just in a monotone tone. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. And you can chant it fast or slow. It doesn't matter. What matters is to use it consciously. Personally, I think that when you sing it, you bring more power in your heart. That's just me. It's really up to you how you use it. So you may find many different songs or melodies that are related to this mantra, and they're all good. And you'll also find variations in the pronunciation. This mantra has been used for hundreds and hundreds of years throughout Asia, and it's now spreading in the West. And throughout all that usage, you'll find little differences in how it's written, little differences in how it's pronounced, and none of that matters. Doesn't matter. Learn the 6 syllables. Use them for yourself. There's no need to discuss it or talk about it with anyone. If you use it, you will experience it. But you have to use it consciously. Personally, I recommend that when you use this mantra, you also visualize Chinrezig. You visualize your Divine Mother. You visualize Christ. You don't have to use these Tibetan or Hindu forms. You can visualize Jesus. Jesus is an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. He is an incarnation of Chinrezig. So is the Dalai Lama. So is Padmasambhava. So is Milarepa. So is Moses. So is Quetzalcoatl and Joan of Arc. There are hundreds of examples. You can use any of them. Any deity or master that stimulates your heart, that inspires you, that gives you a sense of security and protection, visualize that deity when you use the mantra. Not just as an image in the sky, but as being here and now with you. That's how you use it. So if you're a particular deity, let's say, for example, that you feel very close with Krishna from the Hindu tradition, you can use this mantra and visualize Krishna present, standing with you, sitting with you, walking with you, talking with you. If you feel attached, not attached, but close to Mary, the mother of Jesus, you can use her as your image when you use this mantra. Because each of these masters or deities is an expression of Chinrezig. They all are. They're all valid. You can also visualize Samael, who's a great incarnation of Chinrezig. You can visualize him with you, helping you as you use the mantra, chanting the mantra. The power of this mantra will emerge in direct proportion to the amount of energy you invest into it. If you do it a few minutes a day, you're going to get very little. But if you take this mantra seriously and you begin to chant it constantly, always remembering, and when you forget, you start again, chanting it, chanting it, chanting it in your mind. Throughout all your activities, it will help you a lot. And I know the first argument, I won't be able to do my job. I won't be able to drive my car. It'll be dangerous. I'll get hit by a bus when I cross the street. No, you won't. If you're doing this properly, you're paying attention. That is the measure. To do this mantra properly means you are present here and now in your body, paying attention. If you're distracted, you're not doing it right. This mantra should support and energize your presence in the moment. It should give you fuel and energy to be here and now. And then when you meditate, you can relax, close your eyes, visualize the mantra, visualize your deity. It has even more power. You can use this while you're doing your retrospection. You can do it while you're analyzing an ego. You can do it while you're entering to dream yoga. You can do it while you're trying to analyze a dream. This mantra has the power to open doors. Especially the door of your heart. This mantra, since it's related with Chinrezig, it's said that its chief benefit, I mentioned, is intuition. But it has a purpose. It's not just intuition so you know which lottery ticket to buy. It's intuition so that you know how to best act on behalf of others. What is the interest of Christ? What is the purpose of the Divine Mother? It isn't just to give powers to people who are greedy and want to show off powers. This is what many people think. They think if I awaken Kundalini and I practice Tantra, I'll awaken powers. Then I'll be very impressive. That is ignorance and attachment and pride, all fueled by lust. The Divine Mother does not want to show powers, does not want to impress people. She wants to save them from suffering. And she cannot do that through us if we are full of pride, full of arrogance, or envy. She can only do that if we are a fit vessel. So we have to become a fit vessel. Any questions? Yes?
Is Vajrayogini the same as Tara?
Is Vajrayogini the same as Tara? In the same way that every deity is a reflection of deity itself, yes. Tara is the Divine Mother of compassion who emerges from the compassion of Chinrezig. The story goes that when Chinrezig first came out of Amitabha and looked at all the suffering beings in all the worlds and felt overwhelming compassion, this tear sprang out of his eye, and that was Tara, the Divine Mother. So yes, in that sense, she is Vajrayogini, but two sides. Tara is usually shown white. I believe back there's an image of Tara. Yeah, closer to the door. She is the active component of the compassion. She's the protective aspect, the mother who reaches out to protect. Whereas Vajrayogini is the wrathful part, who reaches out to eliminate the ego. to directly fight against the causes of suffering. Was there a question back here? I saw a hand. Yes?
When we do the mantra, do we get more of the benefit when we visualize every vowel with every chakra in the body?
Yeah, you can definitely do the visualization with the vowels. As I mentioned, the two variations of this mantra have the 6 or 7 vowels, depending on which mantra you're talking about. So Om Masi Padme Hum has the 7 vowels, and every sound relates to the chakras. So yes, if you want to directly stimulate those chakras, then visualize that energetic center when you pronounce that sound. So O, related with the heart. And so you would put your attention in the heart to stimulate that region. That is a very valid way of using this mantra, but it's only one. There are many ways to use it. Another question I thought I saw a hand. No? Back here?
Is compassion expressed slightly differently through men and women?
Is compassion expressed slightly different through men and women? I suppose it depends on what level we're talking about. If we're only talking about physically, then clearly we all have our own ways and idiosyncrasies of expressing things, and there are some differences between men and women. But if we're talking about real compassion, which is the intelligence and wisdom of Christ, that is bodhicitta. That is not with any gender. Bodhicitta is genderless. It is androgynous. It is neither male nor female. It has no preference. It is pure love. One. It has no differentiation in terms of how it expresses through one or another. That differentiation is going to come through the idiosyncrasy of the being, not through the compassion itself. So I would say that you have to consider compassion not terrestrially, but ultimately. I put it that way because too often we interpret spiritual teachings according to our own terrestrial perception. Me and you, male and female, self and other, American, South American, European. We have all these differences and differentiations we make that are all false. The reality is we've all been men, we've all been women. We've all been oppressed, and we've all been oppressors. Real compassion perceives that. Real compassion is prajna, or bodhicitta, which cuts through all appearances and sees the fundamental truth. And so in that context, there is no differentiation between man and woman. Yes?
This is more of a comment. I made the mistake of asking a lama one time. He was giving a lecture on Om Masi Padme Hum. And I asked him, I said, can you pronounce it? Om Masi Padme Hum, right? And he gave me a 20-minute story of how somebody pronounced the wrong mantra, right? And how he evoked the evil deity instead. So they have mantras to overcome mispronunciations of mantras. So yeah, it's best to keep secret, I guess. Even a lama, everybody looked at me like I had 3 heads, when I asked this question.
Well, it's true, but we have an education that's different from that tradition. That's why I mentioned that we have to be respectful of the traditions of others. What we're teaching in these lectures is not the same thing that you're going to find taught in the Tibetan Buddhist lineage. We talk about a lot of the same terms and concepts, but this is a different lineage. The truth is, even though it sounds strange and it can sound shocking, is that the Tibetan Buddhist lineage came from our tradition. It's not the other way around. The Gnostic tradition is much older. And when you understand that, and you understand that there are levels of instruction, you can understand that there are going to be many groups and schools at many different levels of teaching. And we have to respect that and understand that. And understand that not everyone's going to have the level of instruction that we have here. It sounds strange to put it that way, but it's true. Even amongst other schools, you find differences in the information that's given, even in the Tibetan tradition. The knowledge that's given to the beginners is very different from that given to those who've advanced through different initiations. In fact, the knowledge can be contradictory. And there are often fights and schisms that emerge because of that, where groups will split because they don't realize the difference in instruction is necessary for the level of being of each group. Even though they appear to contradict, each group needs what they get. And it's the same with these mantras. Samael Aun Weor is a great Tibetan Lama. But he's a great Tibetan Lama who has received all of the lineages and is able to provide teachings that supersede the physical lineages. They're much more profound. It's not to say that the Tibetan lineages are without value. They are all very precious and important. We need to respect them all. But we shouldn't confuse them with what Samael Aun Weor taught. They're different. You bring up to my mind another story of a man that I've mentioned before who also went to a bunch of monks and started talking about the sexual aspect of the teachings. And they got very angry with him and got into a big problem because he was trying to ask them about transmutation with a partner. And these monks were very angry, saying, no, that doesn't exist. That's lustful. That's wrong. You shouldn't be teaching that or studying that. It's all wrong. You're mistaken. They got very upset. And that's because that was the level of education they had received thus far. They did not know that their own tradition has the sexual teachings. They were not introduced to it. They weren't prepared. So that person who brought it up made a big mistake. And he realized it. So the benefit is now we can explain that to everybody. You have to understand the level of instruction that people have received. Not everyone's ready for this type of material. Not everyone's been introduced. The other distinction we should point out, and it's not an easy one to point out, but Samael Aun Weor began to give these teachings in 1950 because he was here to initiate a new era and bring the teachings into the open. He was the first person to do that. That was his job, and it's still his job, and he's still doing it. The tradition that we're talking about today, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, whether it's a Kagyu or Gelugpa or Nyingma tradition, those are all beautiful, but they belong to the previous era. They are Piscean, not Aquarian. They only have knowledge related to the Piscean era. They don't have the Aquarian teaching, the new era. It sounds strange, but it's true. Their teachings are beautiful, they are important, we respect them, just like every other religion in the world. But they have their place, and they had their time. Now those teachings are being propagated in the West so that the Western cultures can better understand their own traditions. And that's why we're studying it. When we study this material, we can better understand Jesus. We can better understand Muhammad. We can better understand all of the mythologies because these teachings, when they're put together, reveal the whole picture. Because thankfully, the Tibetan initiates preserved these teachings, even if they weren't practicing them all. The truth is, the sexual component in many of these mantras were kept in secret by only a handful of people for centuries. In many cases, it passed from one teacher to one disciple to another disciple to another disciple. One person to one person for a long time. We tend to think that Tibet was filled with enlightened beings. It was not. It was a country like any other country, afflicted with problems, a lot of suffering, but fortunately had protection from the masters and was given an opportunity to protect these teachings and preserve them. Specifically, these teachings that I was talking about today, Chenrezig, the different levels of the teachings of Chenrezig, the open teachings were very available in Tibet throughout the history of Tibet, except in the times when Buddhism went underground. The secret teachings were passed from one person to another. There was not a big group. There weren't big schools or big temples or monasteries practicing those techniques. Not even Milarepa had access to the teaching I gave you today. He didn't have the karma. Not even Milarepa. That's how secret this knowledge has been for thousands of years and is now becoming open. So we have to think about that and really value this knowledge. It is extremely precious. We have no idea of its value. This mantra, used consciously, can take you to complete enlightenment. And we have hundreds of mantras, hundreds of techniques and practices. This one can do it. But you see how lazy we are? We have so many tools and we don't even use them. Yes?
Are we supposed to pronounce si instead of ni in the mantra because of the urgency? And the short syllables, or should we elongate the vowels?
I taught you two variations of this same mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum and Om Masi Padme Hum. They are both good. If you're serious about awakening your consciousness and transmuting your sexual energy, use the Om Masi Padme Hum. Use it with the S. It has more power. But you need to use it wisely, consciously, not mechanically. The extension of the vowel is very useful, but not required. Oftentimes, we'll practice these mantras as a group, and we will extend the vowels. And the purpose of that is to give us a chance to really concentrate on them. If we say it rapidly, Om Masi Padme Hum, Om Masi Padme Hum, you can barely feel or concentrate on each sound. You can use it that way, and there's no problem. But generally, we will slow it down and extend the vowels so that we have a chance to really concentrate in each sound, visualize with each sound, feel each sound. But really, it's up to you. In myself, I change it. I never leave it the same. I'm constantly changing and altering my practice to keep it very fluid so that I don't let it become mechanical. I'm constantly looking at it in a new way and changing it and trying to reanalyze it and readdress it so that it doesn't become repetitive and dead. Is there another question?
Why is the M more often than the other vowels?
The M occurs very often in this 6-syllable mantra because the M is related with the prostate and the uterus. When you look at the graphic that I showed you of the physiology of the body in relation with these sounds, you see that the M corresponds with the sexual glands, where the sexual energy is. So that M, when you chant it, that's a strong vibration that stimulates the energy in the prostate or uterus. And when you combine that with the S, it has a lot of power. You can use these mantras, these sounds individually, and we do. We often lead retreats or meditation sessions where we'll just use one sound and work with that for a period of time to get familiarity with it. Any other question in here? Yes?
When you pronounce the first syllable is but with the Trinity we have can we pronounce on it or just
Whether you do it with emphasis or not is up to you. To say Aum or Om. Even if I say Om, that Ah is at the beginning. It's subtle. It's really up to you. Again, to emphasize, the importance of the use of mantra is not in how it comes out of the physical mouth. What empowers the mantra is attention, is how we pay attention and how we're directing energy. That's what makes it powerful. So whether I say Aum or Om, it's pretty much the same thing. But if I do it without being aware of it, if I'm thinking about where I parked my car while I'm doing that, I'm wasting my time. Whether I say Aum or Om.
Yeah, but we activate more chakra out of it.
Yeah, if you emphasize the Ah, it's good. But the Ah also occurs in other parts of the mantra. Padme. So, again, there are many variations on the pronunciations of this mantra. If you look at how it's used all over the world, you will find a bewildering array of pronunciations. So that's why I de-emphasize pronunciation. we all have our own accent. You know, we all have our own way that the tongue works for us. Just use that. Don't get distracted by that. And this gentleman raised the question of that we have to be accurate in our pronunciation. But in the lecture I gave called Mantra Christ Mind Protection, I gave the example of the monk who went into reclusive life to practice his mantra for many years. And it was this mantra, actually, Om Mani Padme Hum. And his master came to visit him, but the monk was out on an island. You remember the story? The monk was out on an island practicing, so the teacher rowed the boat out to visit the student, went out there and he said, so how's your mantra coming along? Show me what you're doing. And the yogi hermit started to chant it, but it was all wrong. And the teacher said, no, you're doing it totally wrong. You've got it all messed up. That isn't the right way. Let me teach you. So he taught him how to do it. And the hermit said, okay, I'm sorry. I've got it now. I've got it. And he did it. He said, okay, yeah, you've got it. So the teacher started to leave, rowing back across the sea. And he hears this noise, and he looks, and here comes the monk. He says, can you tell me once again? I forgot. He was running on the water. So what that shows is that it isn't so much the specifics of the pronunciation, but how you do it. Your attention, your devotion, your faith. That's really what makes the difference. Another question? Back in the back? No? Okay, thank you.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Help Gnostic Radio to help others. Make a donation by visiting gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the wide variety of resources available on our websites. Thank you for your support. May all beings be happy.